and welcome to the second half of Journalism Under Fire. Yes, we are halfway through the amazing amount of live streams that we have planned for this month of conference, and we're delighted that you've chosen to join us here tonight. As many of you know by now, we've just confirmed Bob Woodward to join Dana Priest in conversation at our conference closing event. That's on December 3rd. We'll also hear from Joel Simon, who is the executive director of the amazing group Committee to Protect Journalists, which of course works worldwide to do exactly that, protect journalists and protect press freedoms. And we'll also feature Dana once again in conversation with Peter Baker, who's the chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, and his wife, Susan Glasser, who's a staff writer for the New Yorker. And they, of course, have a new book out. They'll be talking about that as well. That, again, is December 3rd. We're bumping up the start time to accommodate Bob and Dana. So that's going to start at 5 p.m. Mountain Time on December 3rd. And again, all details are on our website, journalismunderfire.org. Quick note of something that is not related to Journalism Under Fire at all, but we, the Santa Fe Council on International Relations, will be hosting our holiday party on December the 8th. This is for our members only. If you're not a member yet, it's a great time to join. We have some really fun things designed to bring us all together and celebrate the holidays. We'll be handing out some prizes. We've got some individual, some books and some other fun stuff to give away. So be sure to join us. If you're not a member yet, we'd love to have you. All details are on our website, sfcir.org/members. Please join us. Tomorrow, of course, we are continuing our week of journeying to various different countries around the world. We're going to China, in a sense. We're going to talk about covering crisis in China, and we have 3 fantastic journalists lined up to speak all about what's happening in China right now, in Hong Kong right now, around press freedoms. There's an awful lot to talk about there too. That starts at 10 a.m. Mountain Time tomorrow. We, of course, will be recognized as one of 3 World Affairs Councils of America Councils of the Year. So there'll be a short little ceremony before we begin. It's going to be a lot of fun, so please join us for that. Moving on to what we're going to talk about tonight. Of course, last year, many of you recall, our organizing question for the conference was, how does technology shape the truth? And one of the speakers that we brought in is an extraordinary young journalist from India, Rana Ayub. She now is a global opinions writer for the Washington Post. And she told us her horrifying story of how a deep fake was used to persecute her and to try to silence her on a lot of her reporting, which was exposing some of the very difficult things that the Modi regime is doing, particularly against the Muslim minority in India. And so she told her story. It was heartbreaking. And that planted a very big seed for me, which was deepfakes are very much part of the world we live in today. I think we haven't yet seen what deepfakes might do ultimately in a political race, for example. And we thought there might be no one better to have than Dr. Hany Farid joining us to talk about the amazing world of deepfakes. So Hany, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Good to be here. Thank you, Sandy.
Let me read your bio really quickly. He is, of course, a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and his research focuses on digital forensics, image analysis, and human perception. He's the co-founder and CTO of 4 and 6 Technologies, an image authentication and forensics company, and senior advisor for the Counter Extremism Project. You sound like you're pretty busy these days.
I recently heard from my former postdoc advisor who said to me, you used to work in this very niche area, this forensic analysis, right? There's, court cases, few national security cases, few AP cases a year. And suddenly it feels like sorting out the real from the fake has become one of the most important problems for individuals, societies, and democracies facing us. And I think it's a really complex and interesting space. And I think deepfakes is just this, one piece that adds a whole new level of complexity and horror to it all.
How's your schooling going this year? I know we're all pivoting to the digital, and I pity the professors in trying to figure out this space. How's it going for you?
It has not been great. I have to say, I'm co-teaching the intro to computer science class here at Berkeley. We have 2,000 students spread across the entire world, every time zone. We have 125 TAs. Everybody is just absolutely buried and having a hard time. But we're getting through it. We're hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel now that the Thanksgiving break is here near us. But yeah, it's not been easy for the students. They are really struggling, and they're going to struggle for another semester. We will be online in the spring, almost certainly for the whole spring. So we're all just sort of holding on and hoping for the best in 6 months from now.
Wow, yes, and the same is true for all our high school fellows and just all our students. This is a
Yeah,
tricky time, and
yeah,
hopefully we can keep our learning alive and get through this so that we can get back into the classroom and
that's
into
right.
some different learning spaces.
Yeah.
Well, we're looking forward to your presentation. Let me set you all up, and away we go. And when folks, let
Right.
me mention, type in as always your questions into the Q&A chat box, and we'll get to those in about 45 minutes.
Terrific. Thank you, Sandy. So I'm hoping that Sandy has set it up so that you are in speaker mode, not in the grid mode. I'm not going to share my slides. You're going to see sort of a superposition of my slides and my video. So if you're in grid mode, just go ahead and put me in speaker mode or pin my video. I'm going to talk about deepfakes. You've almost probably heard about deepfakes, but let me just sort of make a few points about manipulated content. So first of all, and I think everybody probably here knows it, it's not new. As long as we have been photographing scenes, we have been manipulating scenes. Of course, famously, Stalin airbrushed people out of photos that had fallen out of favor, but he wasn't the only one. Dictators throughout history tried to change history by altering the historical record. And of course, at this time, this type of photography and manipulation was in the hands of the few. You actually needed a fair amount of skill to be able to take effectively a negative, put it in the darkroom, manipulate it by painting on it, and then re-imaging it. So it was not sort of a widespread problem, if you will. Now, of course, as we entered the digital age in the 90s or so on, we started to be able to do some interesting things. Why? Well, we all had digital cameras, and we all had things like Photoshop that allowed for relative ease of manipulation, where I could do something very disrespectful like this to the Obamas. And, still needed a little bit of skill, but we're starting to democratize that access because now we have the tools available on our desktops. And we could do things like this, and we could have a lot of fun. And for most of the 90s and early 2000s, I was concerned about photo manipulation, but the number of cases that it really sort of popped into were relatively small. Courts, occasionally the big news wires, occasionally a national security case. But we, for the most part, trusted the images and the videos and the audios that we saw, even if there was some funny business going on. Now today, and particularly over the last few years with rapid advances in big data and machine learning and artificial intelligence and things like GPUs, which is the underlying machinery that is doing the processing, we've taken the ability to manipulate images and video and audio and taken it to a whole new level. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you navigate to this website, thispersondoesnotexist.com, all one word, you will be presented with a picture of, a person that doesn't exist, somebody like what you see on the screen here. So these people here and all the people on that website have been completely 100% synthesized by a machine learning algorithm. And you can see that the synthesis crosses race and gender and age, and people have facial hair and they have glasses and they have jewelry. And it is highly, highly realistic images of people who don't exist. This is a static or an image-based type of deep fake, where deep fake is this generic term to refer to computer synthesized. And before I talk about how these are made, where the threats are, what we can do about them, let me just talk about some of the places we've even seen. This isn't, a video. It's not showing a Biden or a Harris saying something they never did. Where's the threat, for example, in being able to create an image of a person who doesn't exist? Well, the first example, which is now, I believe, about a year or so old, was on LinkedIn. We think that, this is a story from the Associated Press, that most likely it was Russian agents who had created a fake profile on LinkedIn using a photo of a person who doesn't exist. Almost certainly this was taken from that website or something like it. And they were slowly but surely creating connections with people in the national security space. What the end result was, we don't know, but it was one of the first examples of creating a fraudulent profile with an image of a person who doesn't exist. And why is this important is, well, if you take another image from a website, it's actually relatively easy to find by just using a reverse image search. But in this case, there was no way of finding that image because it's being synthesized one-off. My favorite example of using an image from this person does not exist is here. This was a high school student. This was just this year, was bored during the holiday break. And he created a fake candidate for Congress. He got him verified by Twitter with the blue check mark, and actually also got the Board of Elections to verify him as well. High school kid did this, and the photos that he used of this person was from this person does not exist. And just recently, just a few weeks ago, we saw that in the Hunter Biden New York Post story, the profile of the purported computer security researcher was created using a photo from this person does not exist in order to create credibility. So when you can create identities of people who don't exist, you can add credibility to fraudulent information. Okay, so let's talk about how this is made, and then we're going to get into video and where the real threats, as I see them, are coming forward. So here's the basic mechanism for creating a person who doesn't exist. So what do you want to do? You want to make an image with a bunch of pixels in it, but you want those pixels to line up to look like a person. So here's what you do. You start by just guessing. You literally slap down a bunch of pixels into an image. That's the generator's job. And the generator takes that image and it hands it to a discriminator. And the discriminator has access to a bunch of images of, well, people. Now, if I wanted to create cars that don't exist, I'd have a bunch of images of cars. If I wanted cats, a bunch of images of cats. But I want to create people. So I have a bunch of images of people. And the discriminator's job is to say, can I distinguish that image that was provided to me from these images that I know are people? And of course, the answer is sure. I can write a really simple computer discriminator to discriminate those two. So it loops back and it tells the generator, this is not a person. And the generator says, okay, I'm going to make some changes to the image. Sends it back to the discriminator, and they do this loop over and over and over again, millions and millions of times. And eventually what will happen is that the generator will learn to create an image that when it hands it to the discriminator says, yeah, I can't tell the difference. This is the same characteristics of all these other things. This very simple mechanism is a so-called generative adversarial network, or a GAN, G-A-N. Generative because, well, it's generating something. Adversarial because you're pitting two systems against each other, the generator and the discriminator. If you will, it's the forger and the detective, but they're helping each other in sequence like this. And network, generative adversarial network, because underlying these two boxes here is a deep neural network, the underlying computational machinery that is doing the work of the discrimination and the generation. So this is the engine that underlies this person does not exist, which is based on research that came out of the NVIDIA research lab. Now that same basic mechanism can now be used to create deep fake videos. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's say I start with a single frame of a video of the actor Jennifer Lawrence, and I want to change her identity to be Steve Buscemi. Why? Well, because the internet is weird, and that's what the internet does. So now what we're going to do is the generator's job is to change her identity to his identity. So it makes some changes to the image, hands it to the discriminator. The discriminator says, is this Steve Buscemi? No, looks like Jennifer Lawrence. And by the way, at the same time, it's making sure that the appearance of the image that the generator is creating will have the same general appearance. That is, the lighting will be the same, the head tilt will be the same, the eyes will be slightly closed. And so it's trying to do two things now, match the appearance and the identity. Nope, it looks like Jennifer Lawrence. Go back to the generator, make some changes to the image, go back to the discriminator, and eventually over time, with enough iterations here, it will learn to swap her face with his face. Now, you do that frame after frame after frame of a video, and then you can do something like this. Original video is here, face swap deep fake is here, where you can see now on each frame, I have replaced her face with his face. There's an audio track here. I'm just not playing it because I wanted to be able to talk over this video, but the audio works perfectly fine. It's just the audio taken from here. Now it's obviously her voice. This is obviously done for comedic purposes. It is brilliant, by the way. I mean, who knew Steve Buscemi was such a good-looking woman? And basically you can go on to GitHub right now and you can download a GitHub repository and you can run this code on your computer or on a cloud instance that you can spin up for a few bucks. And we've democratized access to Hollywood style special effects. Now, that's one of a few different types of deepfakes. Let me just talk about the two others. Face swap deepfake, learn to replace one person's face from the eyebrows to the chin with another person's face. Puppet master deepfakes, take a single image of a person, here it's Putin, and I'm going to sit in front of the camera, and as I move my eyebrows and my mouth and turn my head, it will animate that single image. Yeah, so he's the puppet, I'm the puppet master, and I can get him to say whatever I want, right? Lip sync deepfake is I take a video of, say, Zuckerberg saying something, I create a new audio track that is either synthesized or just an impersonator, and I synthesize only his mouth to be consistent with the new audio track, a so-called lip sync deepfake. Okay, so slightly different mechanisms, but at its core, what are we doing? We are trying to create a video of a person saying and doing something that they never said. That's the game, right? The special effect game. Okay. So where are we seeing problems? You already heard about the first problem, by the way. Sandy very nicely illustrated one of the most troubling examples of this, which is non-consensual pornography. Women's likenesses are being taken and inserted into sexually explicit material, and that material is being distributed online. It is being used to harm reporters. It is being used to harm human rights investigators. It's being used to harm politicians. And of course, it is being used against performers and famous people, and sometimes just people who attracted unwanted attention by trolls. And this is probably the single largest use of deepfake technology today. There are entire websites that have been propped up that are dedicated to doing this. And by the way, I will mention that I think the platforms have not done a particularly good job of responding to this. However, both Reddit and Pornhub have banned, in theory, non-consensual porn. And the question you want to ask yourself is, how bad is something if Reddit and Pornhub simultaneously ban something, two places not necessarily known for their high editorial standards? So it's a particularly nasty application of this type of technology. Now, as I said earlier, we are concerned with how this technology will add diesel fuel onto an already existing fire that is the misinformation apocalypse that we're all dealing with. So now it's not just a fake tweet, a fake news story, a fake Facebook post, but now there's image and video to go along with it. It's not just Hillary Clinton is running a child porn ring out of a pizza joint in DC. It's like, here's a video of her talking about it. So how these will start to influence misinformation campaigns is very worrisome. I have, for the last 20 years, been working in this general space of authentication, and for a long time I've worried about how you authenticate evidence in a court of law. Body cams from a police officer, CCTV from the street, people just recording the police brutality, police killing somebody on the street. How do you authenticate those when you need to introduce that as evidence in a court of law? Obviously, on the national security front, we are constantly dealing with satellite imagery, with imagery coming out of various parts of the world that are not particularly friendly. How do we make incredibly important decisions when we may or may not be able to trust the visual content that we are consuming? Fraud. We've already seen the first example of fraud. CEO was bilked out of $250,000 because somebody had synthesized an audio in another CEO's voice saying, please transfer $250,000 in this elaborate scheme, and they lost $250,000. Imagine this scenario. I create a video of Mark Zuckerberg in a private meeting saying Facebook's profits are down 10%. How long do you think it would take for me to move the market to the tune of billions of dollars before anybody figured out that it's fake? If we have the ability to create video and audio of people saying anything they want, we have the ability to do some real damage. And what we are seeing is that these types of technologies are getting better and better and more democratized and easier to use. And the threat is on the horizon, if not already here. Now, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how we can detect these. So in these video clips of Obama, these are the weekly addresses. I started the video a little early, sorry about that. But what you would have noticed is that on each time he started his weekly address, he does something really interesting. He tilts his head up and to the right and he says, hey everybody, hey everybody, hey everybody. Does it on almost every time. It's this sort of interesting little mannerism, if you will. And you can see it right here, by the way. So he does, hey, everybody. And he comes down and he purses his lips and then he starts talking. It's really sort of nice little thing he does every time. And so as we started thinking about how we can detect these deep fakes, we thought, well, at its core, what is wrong with deep fakes? It's not the person it purports to be. It's not Jennifer Lawrence. It's not Steve Buscemi, rather. It's Jennifer Lawrence moving the head. It's not Putin. It's the puppet master moving Putin. So we are going to go after, in the first version of the technique that I'm going to describe to you, what we call a soft biometric, a soft behavioral biometric that tries to capture the mannerisms and how we talk. So I just raise my eyebrows there. So when I emphasize words, I tend to raise my eyebrows a little bit. I tend to lean in a little bit too when I do that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that technique. So here's maybe one of my favorite behavioral mannerisms of former President Obama. What I'm showing you here on the horizontal axis is time. This is about 10 seconds. And on the vertical axis, what I'm showing you here is one of two things. In blue is how much Obama tilts his head up and down in the affirmative. And in orange is how much he is turning down the sides of his mouth, frowning. What do you notice? They're correlated, right? So Obama has this thing that when he delivers bad news, he tends to tilt his head down and he frowns. Yep. And so there's a correlation between these two things that he does. Now, imagine a lip sync deepfake. This is one frame of a lip sync deepfake. So what have I done here? Well, the mouth in a lip sync deepfake is doing whatever the new audio track is, right? The impersonator, the synthesized audio. So it's moving the way the audio is moving. But what's the head doing? Well, it's doing whatever was in the original video. I don't know. The mouth and the head don't know about each other anymore. We've created this chimera of sorts. And so now when you look at the same pattern of head rotation and front of the mouth, they're decoupled because the mouth doesn't know what the head is doing and the head doesn't know what the mouth is doing. Yeah. So we've seen a violation of that. Now, that's Obama's sort of mannerism. Not everybody has that mannerism. I don't think I do that, and you may not do that. So this guy over here, he does something different. So here now what I'm plotting in blue is the chin pucker. Yeah, this thing that he does. And in orange is this expression. Yeah. And what do you notice here is that they're decorrelated. So when his mouth is open, he doesn't pucker his chin and vice versa. Yeah, I'd never noticed that, by the way. Now, Alec Baldwin, brilliant, funny impersonation on Saturday Night Live. We created a face swap deep fake. So we took Alec Baldwin doing the impersonation and we slapped Trump's face onto that. And what do you notice here? Well, Alec Baldwin does something interesting. He took this caricature of Trump, the chin pucker and the mouth, and he sort of does them at the same time, which is not correct. Yeah? So we've sort of violated some of the mannerisms. And so we're going to use these on specific individuals. So this is not going to help me. It's not going to help Sandy. It's probably not going to help you. But for high profile people, politicians, CEOs, investigative journalists who are reporting breaking stories, we can build these types of soft biometric behavioral mannerisms. And then as videos are being released, we have the hope of being able to determine if they are deep fakes or not. Okay, so again, let me remind you that in a lip sync deep fake, I've decoupled the mouth and the head. In the puppet master, the person moving, carrying out the mannerisms isn't the person it depicts. And in the face swap, same thing. The person you see is not the person moving. So in each of these cases, we are hoping that we will have a violation of those behavioral mannerisms. So here's how we're going to do it. Take a video and track the face over time. It's actually relatively straightforward to do this. The bounding box gives me head rotation in 3D. The red dots along the face tell me how the various parts of the face are moving, and the green lasers coming out of the eye tell me eye direction. We take all of that tracked information across the video, and we extract so-called action units. Things like, are you smiling? Are you raising your eyebrows? Are you furrowing your brow? Are you frowning? We also look at the head movement. Are you tilting your head up and down? Are you rotating your head? We get a total of 20 measurements, 18 action units, 2 head movements, and we look at all pairs of correlations. So how do you, when you rotate your head and your mouth expression change? How does the chin pucker with the mouth open change? How does the eyebrow with head rotation or head movement change? We look for all pairs of correlations because we don't know what is going to matter. And what we find is that when we take all those correlations, there's 190 in total. And I can't visualize 190 dimensional space. In fact, I can't really visualize beyond 3. So I'm going to take those 190 measurements and I'm going to slam them into a 2-dimensional space, the plane that you're seeing right here. Okay. By the way, I think it's really cool the way my hand looks behind this. I'm a little mesmerized by this now. Each colored point here corresponds to a single 10-second video clip of Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders. You can see that we did this research during the peak of the Democratic primary. What do you notice? Well, Kamala Harris is here. Cory Booker is here. Bernie Sanders is here. Barack Obama is here. They're all in different parts of the world, right? There's this little space here. So how is this useful to me? Well, these are all the authentic videos. So if I just put, for example, a bounding circle around all the Obama videos, well, any video can be face tracked, extract the 190 measurements, project it into the 2-dimensional space. And if it falls inside the circle, it's probably Obama. And if it doesn't, well, it's either a deepfake Obama, which are these dark brown points that you see here, or it's just somebody else. In some ways, I don't really care. It's just not Obama. You may be purporting that this is Obama, but it doesn't move like Obama, and so I don't think it is Obama. Yeah. Now, of course, we don't do this in this sort of simplified 2-dimensional space. We do this in the full 190-dimensional space. So computation is a little bit more complex than this, but this is the basic idea. So how well does it work? Let's find out. So best part of this research, by the way, is we just got to watch a lot of videos of Obama over the last year, which was wonderful, very therapeutic. Took a bunch of authentic videos of Obama. Our friends at the University of Washington created some lip sync deep fakes for us. We found this very good and very funny impersonator of Obama. And we created face swap deep fakes where we took Obama's face and put him into this impersonator video to create a face swap deep fake. And then our friends down at the University of Southern California created some Puppet Master deep fakes for us. So we had 1, 2, 3 types of deep fakes. And then since we're not really in the business of detecting deep fakes per se, I just want to know whether this is Obama or not. We looked at impersonators as well. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. We got a total of about 207,000 10-second clips of Obama. And you can see the numbers down here for, these are just random people, mostly newscasters, the comedic impersonator, and a total of about 17,000 different types of deep fakes. I'm going to plot for you the accuracy in discriminating random people from Obama, comedic impersonator from Obama, and then the various deep fakes from Obama. And I'm going to plot those as the area under the curve, AUC. The only thing you have to know about that measure is that 0.5 means I'm guessing, I'm at chance, right? Flip the coin. 1.0 means I have perfect classification, right? That's all I'm going to show you. Okay, good. So let's see how we did. Analyzing only 10-second clips. So all I get access to is a 10-second clip, about 240 frames at 24 frames a second. We are at an AUC for random people, comedic impersonators, face swaps, and puppet masters above 0.9, getting close to 0.95. That is considered very, very good. Not perfect, but very good. We've taken a little hit here, by the way, with the lip syncs. We're not great here. So why is that? Well, if you think about the nature of this lip sync deep fake, everything on the video is real. The way his eyebrows are moving, the head is moving, the expressions. The only thing that's not real is this, the mouth. So I'm not going to show it here because I don't have the time to do it, but I will tell you that if we are a little bit more careful on the features that we use, where one feature is always taken from the mouth, the other feature is always taken from the head, this bar goes all the way up to about 0.95, right about there. So we can actually do better. Now, this is only analyzing 10-second clips. Typical video on the internet is about 3 minutes or so. So if we integrate, if we average across the whole video, we get this nice little bump. This is what you're seeing in the dark blues. And now we're getting really close to 1.0, almost perfect detection accuracy between different types of deep fakes and the originals. And so now for certain individuals, particularly Obama, who has a very distinct mannerism, we can do very well, but it's not unique to him. So for example, here are the accuracies. Again, AUC 0.5 is chance, 1.0 is perfect. Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, Elizabeth Warren. You can see that the AUCs for just about everybody are above 0.9. Elizabeth Warren is my favorite. You can see that we're almost perfect. Why is that, by the way? She is incredibly animated. If you've watched her talk, you see she has these really distinct speaking style. The way she talks, her head is whipping back and forth. Her eyebrows are incredibly expressive. She is wonderful for us from this behavioral mannerism point of view. You can see on Trump, by the way, it's one of the worst, and that is because he's completely unanimated. He has very, very little facial expressions, and that's why we take a little bit of hit on his accuracy, but still doing reasonably well above 0.9. So in that technique, what we've been doing is taking specific individuals for which we can get about an hour or so of video, building these behavioral models, and then when videos are released, we can analyze them to determine if we think it's a deep fake or not. Okay, that was technique number one. Let me just talk about very briefly two other techniques quickly. So this is one of my favorite techniques that we've been working on, which is the mapping of phonemes to visemes. So everybody knows what a phoneme is. It's the sound you make. MBP, mother, brother, parent, FV, favor, victor. Okay, you're all muted at home. Try this at home if you would. Try to say the word mother, brother, or parent without closing your mouth, your lips. Yeah, so mother, mother, other. If you're a ventriloquist, you can do it. I can't do it. I sound like an idiot. Other. And for some reason, I keep doing it. When you form this phoneme, MBP, you have to close your mouth. When you form this phoneme, favor, victor, the lower lip kicks in a little bit and you get this very distinct viseme, which is the shape the mouth has to make in order to make a sound. So why is this interesting? Well, the nature of the lip sync deep fake, which is one of the hardest to detect because all you're manipulating is it doesn't know about the shape of the mouth. It doesn't know about phonemes. It doesn't know about visemes. It doesn't know about anything other than it's pushing around a bunch of pixels until this face sort of looks like this face, which means it will occasionally make little mistakes. And the mistakes are really interesting. So for example, here are 6 sequential frames of Trump saying, I am, right? So here's the beginning of it. And here's the end of it where he's enunciating the phoneme M. And you can see his lips are fully closed. Here is same sequence, now just 4 frames of him saying I am in a lip sync deep fake. And here you can see that the mouth is not fully closed. There's a little sliver in the mouth. And by the way, if I showed you the video, you would never notice this. At 24 to 30 frames a second, as this video is playing, you're listening to the video, you won't notice these little things. But we will notice them because we can measure how we can figure out where the phoneme MBP is. We can measure how big the mouth is, whether it's open or not. And then we can tell whether it's consistent with a real enunciation of the phoneme M or it is violated somehow. Now, it doesn't always get violated, but it often does. So this is, again, accuracy now in terms of percent correct on a 20-second clip. These 3 columns here, the first 3 columns are for different types of lip sync deep fakes. This was done in collaboration with our friends down Stanford University. And this is our accuracy on saying that an original video is original. So you can see on original, we're just about at 100%. I think this was 99.5%. And for each of these, we can catch a significant number. This is the hardest one. The S here stands for short, where in the entire 20-second clip, only 1 word was changed. That was it, right? And so we're still catching about 80% of them, which isn't bad. Here, the L stands for long, which means multiple words were altered. We can catch every single one of them. And this is a different type of lip sync, which is a little bit better, but we're still catching in the high 90s of them. Okay, let me just mention very briefly this latest technique that we've been thinking about, because I think it's really cute. This obviously is me. What you're seeing in the video is the tracking of my ear as I'm making facial expressions. And you'll see I'm going to smile a little bit, and then I'm going to open my mouth. And what you notice is that there's actually quite a bit of motion in my ear as I talk. And the reason, of course, is because of these muscles that connect my jaw to parts of my ear. Now, it's different for different people. So here, for example, as I open my mouth, my tragus, which is this little part right here, kicks in a little bit. By the way, Biden does this also. We've just been analyzing his videos. And the reason this is interesting to us is that when you look at the nature of deep fakes, nobody is looking at this part of the head. They're looking here. And so these things, which are muscularly attached, as well as, by the way, the appearance here, which we're also looking at, are not currently being synthesized by the algorithms. And so we're currently looking to see how we can use this physiological constraint of how the jaw moves and then how the ears move in relation to that to detect deep fakes. And so you can see what the game is here. There's no silver bullet. There's no magic here. There isn't, hey, here's how we detect deep fakes. There's lots of different techniques that we start to cobble together so that when videos do reach our desk, we can start to try to say something intelligent about them, whether we think they're real or not. All right, 2 more slides. Let me just finish up with a few thoughts, and then I look forward to the Q&A. What are the challenges we're facing? So I don't think I have to tell anybody here that there are rapid developments in machine learning and AI happening on a 3-month cycle. Every 3 to 6 months, we see big developments in the machine learning AI community, and those developments are being pushed out into the world of people creating these types of synthetic content. So it's a very fast moving landscape. If I had the ability to create synthetic images of people who don't exist, or non-consensual pornography, or a president saying something they never did, that would be bad, but it's not nearly as bad as the coupling of that with the fact that I can spread this information at light speed to the world in a matter of seconds through social media channels. So we have to also think not just about the creation, but about the delivery mechanism that social media, the Facebooks, the YouTubes, and the Twitters of the world have allowed anybody to say, well, just about anything. And while there are many good things that come from that, yeah, there's some pretty bad things that come of it too. And so you have to think about the role of social media in this space as well, which is a huge challenge for us, because on YouTube today, there are 500 hours of YouTube video uploaded a minute. You can't forensically analyze your way out of that. It is simply too much information. The volume that is coming in is massive, and that's a huge challenge. Now, we can create synthetic data, we can deliver it, and we have a public that's willing to consume it. We are incredibly polarized as a society, and it's not just the US, it's around the world. And so when this content lands on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, on TikTok, people are willing, in fact, eager to believe the worst in the people that they don't like or disagree with. And now it's the trifecta. You can create, you can deliver, and you've got consumption and people who are willing to believe and then re-amplify that. And that is the perfect misinformation storm. Danielle Citron has this beautiful term called the liar's dividend. Yeah? And this probably is the biggest threat that we face, which is that if we enter a world where any news story, any image, any video, any audio recording can be manipulated, well, then nothing has to be real. And to give you a sense of how fast this landscape has shifted, I'm sure everybody here remembers 2015, then candidate Trump gets himself in trouble because he said some pretty bad things about women on the Access Hollywood tape. What did he do in response? He apologized. I went back and listened. He actually said the words, "I am sorry." It was inappropriate. Yeah. 2 years later, he's asked about it by a reporter. What does he say? It was fake. I'm done. One swipe of the hand, the whole thing's gone. We don't talk about it again. When we enter a world where we can manipulate what a politician says, they have plausible deniability, and that is very dangerous, I would argue, arguably more dangerous than the fakes themselves. And you are seeing that play out in real time today, post-election. Other challenge is, because of the rapid pace, is that it's an arms race. I'm sure many of you are thinking, all right, you just told me how you detect deep fakes. Why don't I just create better deep fakes? It's the right question to ask. There's an arms race. All of cybersecurity is an arms race. Spam, malware, viruses, ransomware, everything is this fight that we're in. And so our job is made that much harder, is that we have a very committed adversary. Lastly, what are the interventions? What do we do? Right? Unplug the internet. That's one option. I think that's actually not a terrible option some days, but probably not going to happen. So first and foremost, the Facebooks of the world, the Twitters of the world, the YouTubes of the world have got to start taking more responsibility. We have got to stop saying, I don't want to be the arbiter of truth. We have got to stop saying, we're simply a platform. We connect people, right? We have to stop saying we are the free speech wing of the free speech party. The party's over, guys, right? We are seeing real world harms coming from your services. You've got to stop hiding and start taking responsibility for the very bad things that are happening to individual societies and democracies. Knock it off. Number two, I say this reluctantly because I don't frankly have a lot of confidence in our ability to regulate this space, but we have to regulate this space. Europeans are moving, a lot of movement on Capitol Hill. It's extremely political. It's extremely polarized. The Republicans are pushing what I consider to be a false narrative that social media is anti-conservative. The Democrats have their own problems on the other side, but we have to start thinking about how to regulate the technology sector. I would argue that we should focus less on the harmful speech and more on the underlying algorithms that promote content. What you have to understand about social media is that it is nowhere even close to being a neutral platform. 70%, 70, of all videos watched on YouTube are recommended by YouTube, either watch next or in the what's up for you on the right-hand side of your browser. This just in, guys, you may not want the responsibility, but you're a publisher. And that means we have to start thinking about what are the recommendation algorithms doing? Why do they keep promoting conspiratorial and hateful and divisive? Well, it's because that's what engages user. Why do we want to engage in users? Well, that's how we make money. The algorithms, the recommendation algorithms is the magic here, and get away from you can't say this, you can't say this, and start talking about what are you promoting to your users? Because let's face it, if it's on page 20 of a Google search, it's probably a lot less harmful than if it's at the very top of a Google search. Obviously, we have to invest in more technology on how to deal with the rollout of these technologies. That's the kind of thing that I do, so I have a little bit of a bias there. And as an educator, I think we have to start figuring out how do we educate the next generation of digital citizens? How do we teach people to engage online in a thoughtful, respectful, and engaged way, and not fall for the nonsense and the crap that keeps pouring out of the internet on a daily basis? And that is a huge burden that we have in our educational system. Lastly, I'll just say, on my website, farid.berkeley.edu, are lots of papers and a bunch of op-eds and some more writings that I've done on this. So if you're interested in learning more about deepfakes and some of the details on what we've done, you're welcome to navigate to that website and get some of the information from there. And I think with that, I will stop. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. That was astonishing. We do certainly have some questions from the audience. I've got a question for you. I've got a few questions for you. I guess my first question is, I think a lot of us were worried about this 2020 electoral cycle and the role that a deepfake might play. And to echo what you said, all you have to do is send it out there, and then the hard work is actually undoing that. Were you worried about that? Did you have reason to be concerned?
Yeah, I was worried about it, but it was not my biggest concern. And the reason was that good old-fashioned fake news works. You don't actually have to get that sophisticated to mess with the American electorate. All you got to do is just say stuff that's not true, and it seems to work. I mean, look at the whole QAnon conspiracy. You don't need any images or videos to convince people of this bizarre, absolutely absurd conspiracy. And so, when I was looking at the landscape, I thought, you know what, just fake news works. So while I thought it was a risk, I didn't think it was a huge risk. Now, we did see fake images. We did see fake videos of Biden, but they weren't deep fakes. The Pelosi videos of her purportedly drunk were just slowed down. So I think what's happening is you don't have to be that sophisticated to mess with the American voter, the average American voter. Now, eventually that probably will change, right? Maybe eventually we'll stop falling for this idiotic conspiracies. And then you're going to have to sort of, add in the more sophisticated deepfakes, images, or video. When's it going to come? Is it going to come? I don't know. It's hard to imagine that these are not somewhat of a threat. And even if they're not a threat in the actual material that's produced, the liar's dividend is always going to exist, even if people don't unleash the deep fakes. The fact that you can gives everybody plausible deniability. And that, honestly, is what worries me more.
I'm going to build on a question from Ambassador Marcus Guino, who's on our board. And he asks, did the Russians or other actors use these techniques during the 2020 elections? And maybe I'll just expand that. We know that Russia has invested significant amounts of time and money in the arts of disinformation. In fact, I believe they invented it.
Yeah.
Or what are the capabilities of other states to engage in this kind?
Okay. So first of all, my graduate student can go on to GitHub and download a repository, compile code to create a face swap deepfake, and it's pretty good. So do state actors have access to this technology? 100% absolutely. As far as I know, we did not see it play out with a specific deepfake in this cycle. Yeah. Now, we saw lots of Russian interference with misinformation and disinformation campaigns, not just in the last few months, in the last 4 years. They have slowly but surely been sowing civil unrest, on Twitter and on Facebook and on TikTok and on YouTube. It's a long game they're playing in the misinformation landscape. So do they have the ability to do it? Absolutely. When and if will they release it? I don't know.
What have been your favorite examples of deepfake? And I mean
Yeah,
favorite in terms of admiring the craft that's gone into them.
good. I have two favorites. One is one of the early one, which is Jordan Peele doing Obama. So if you haven't seen it, it's been seen. It's been played a little bit to death, but it's basically Jordan Peele. By the way, does a great Obama impersonation, and he says just absolutely the funniest things that obviously the president or former president would never say. That I think was very well executed. There's one that just came out, and it's shows Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger in spliced into the movie The Step Brothers. And there's this very funny scene where the two brothers are in the room, and it's Stallone and Schwarzenegger, and it is exceedingly well executed. It's one of the difficult things with the deepfakes for a long time was resolution. They were all a little soft, a little blurry. This thing was just beautiful. I mean, really well done, sophisticated, high resolution, high quality, almost no visual artifacts. I just saw it maybe 2 days ago. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube if you search for that. By the way, I also love the Jennifer Lawrence, Steve Buscemi because it's so goddamn funny.
Well, and I think a lot of our minds when it comes to deep fakes go to things like interference in the political process. But, one author I was reading was talking about how it could be used for corporate sabotage, where you could come up with, 10 seconds of Mark Zuckerberg saying something that immediately depresses Facebook stock, and then in come the predators. Is this an additional sort of area of concern that you look at?
Yeah, I can tell you that I've talked with firms that represent, powerful CEOs, and they're very worried about this. And I do think here's where it's a really hard problem. If a video comes out of President-elect Biden saying something illegal or insensitive, we'll eventually get around to debunking it, right? The media will do what the media does very well, and we'll figure it out. And yeah, there'll always be these conspiracies about it, but for the most part, we can set the record straight. If I release a video of Zuckerberg saying Facebook profits are down 10%, it doesn't have to last more than a couple of minutes. It doesn't matter if it's figured out to be fake, right? I can move the market to the tune of billions. And that, I think, is a real concern. I mean, we've already seen these, some weird story hits Twitter, and you can move the market to the tune of hundreds of millions of billions of dollars. So imagine the power of that. I think that's probably just a matter of time, by the way, on the financial fraud. That's going to happen.
And are there, you talked about regulation a little bit, but are there algorithms in place, for example, that can analyze, video that's been uploaded to do this kind of work?
No, there is no algorithms that can work in real time at the scale of YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, or Facebook, or any other social media site. Nothing exists. Now, what does exist is instead of trying to authenticate the content after the fact, authenticating the content at the point of recording. This is so-called control capture. So the idea is on this device, at the point that you record something, you extract GPS location, date and time, and all the pixels in the audio, video, or image. You cryptographically sign that, and you attach it to the image. And so now you have, if you will, this little secure lock that says, this was captured at this place, at this time, and I've authenticated it. That image starts making its way around, and then you can authenticate it downstream. This is something that Adobe has been exploring, called the Content Authentication Initiative, in collaboration, I believe, with Twitter and the New York Times. I really like this technology because it actually scales. Yeah. And by the way, I should say, sorry, I should have said this at the beginning of that. For full disclosure, I'm an advisor to a small company that works in this space. I have a conflict of interest when I talk about that technology, and I think it's important to disclose that. But having said that, I very much like this technology because in some ways it's the right thing to do. Why should I produce a piece of content, distribute to the world, and every single person consuming it has to worry about authenticating it? I'm in the best position to authenticate it, or rather my device is in the best position to authenticate it. Let's authenticate it here, and then it can go out in the world and be self-authenticating. I think that's a very, very smart way to think about the problem. But then, of course, you need the Facebooks and the YouTubes and the Twitters of the world to care about authenticating content. Here's another idea, by the way. I think every branch of the US government should use control capture. I think if you're going to be releasing footage from the White House or from the halls of the Senate or Congress, we should be able to trust that that's real. It seems like a really simple idea, right? At a time when it's so hard to trust anything now. I remember when the Pelosi video came out and it was so clearly manipulated, because we can go back to the C-SPAN feed and see it. And I'm still getting hate mail from people telling me the C-SPAN video is fake. Like, all right, I don't know, what do we do at this point? All right. But if I could have authenticated that, I'm sure I'd still be getting hate mail, but maybe a little bit less than before.
So great question here from Julian Hayda. In fact, this might be the greatest question we've had in the conference so far. There's two questions. What are the current legal protections for the kinds of biometric data that can be copied to create fakes? And here's the question that I love. Do I own my own mannerisms?
Oh, man. Okay, couple of things. First of all, that may very well be the best question I've gotten on this topic ever. So a couple of things. The biometrics we extract are what we call soft biometrics. They're not your face, they're not your fingerprint, they're not your iris, they're not your DNA. They don't even come close to being able to uniquely identify you from 7 billion people in the world, and we would never claim that. Now, I can't tell you how unique your mannerisms are, but we do not believe that they will distinguish you from even millions of people, let alone hundreds of thousands of people. And so, but I don't need it to. That's why we call it a soft biometric. I just need it to distinguish you from the people trying to impersonate you, right? That's just a handful of other people. And so now, will it fall under the categorization of a biometric the way the Illinois law says, well, you can't capture faces because of the privacy issue? I'd be surprised, because I just don't think it's uniquely identifiable. And I think you need to really show that it is, that the way you move your head and your mouth will distinguish you from 7 billion people. I don't think it will, but honestly, we've actually never done the study, because that's a hard study to do, because we don't have that much data for that many people to build it. But I think it's a great question. Yeah, I'm going to add that into my long list of things to think about for the future.
And a follow-up from Julian, is there a database of the video of every public figure's mannerism?
Good. We have one, not every public figure, of course, but the ones that we have been looking at, we don't distribute it. So I mentioned earlier the arms race, and one way to make the arms race go a lot faster is for us to do what we do and put all the code online and all the data. We don't do that. We publish technical papers. We are academics. We do that to help the field move forward, but we withhold the code and the data, because we think putting it out there is likely to mean more likely that people will create better fakes, not that will push the field forward. We do share it with select researchers who are in our space, but we don't put it out there. I don't know of any single public centralized database of all public leaders. It's YouTube for us. We just scrape YouTube. And so for anybody who's a public figure, YouTube is a really good place to find a lot of video of them.
So you live and teach, obviously, in Silicon Valley, or close to Silicon Valley, let's say, just north of it.
I literally can see San Francisco out the window right here. It's a nice sunset, by the way.
And Silicon Valley has made, its fortune on essentially predicting the future or anticipating our technological needs for the future. When we have you back in 5 years' time, what do you think you're going to be talking about? Where are we headed with this?
I can't tell you where I'm going to talk about tomorrow, let alone 5 years. God, Sandy, that's a great question. I don't think we'll be talking about deep fakes. I think we'll be talking about something else.
Yeah.
Here's what I can tell you about technology. I don't actually think Silicon Valley was particularly good at predicting the future. I think they just stumbled backwards into it and made a couple $1 billion. I think the nature of technology is that it is very, very unpredictable. And I don't think, by the way, any of us 20 years ago at the modern internet that we all know would have seen this landscape. I don't think when social media came around, we thought this is going to be a disaster. So I think it's really hard to predict. There's a regulatory landscape that's incredibly complex. There is, technology innovation. Are we going to have quantum computers 2 years from now, which will completely change the landscape of computing and what we can do? So I don't know. My guess, however, though, is I think we will still be talking about the weaponization and misuse of technology. That has been the one constant for the last 20 years, is the weaponization of technology against individuals, societies, and democracies, whether it was in the form of spam, which we've had for decades now, in the form of deepfakes and non-consensual porn. I think we will continue to see struggles with how technology is integrating with society. I just don't know what the specific ones will be.
Question here from another of our board members, Scott Bunton. He says, you mentioned that in your judgment, even with its acknowledged problems, government regulation is needed in this space. Can you identify some specific concepts of regulation that
Good.
should or could be enacted into law?
Good. I have a few thoughts on this. I'm sure everybody by now has heard of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. There was the Trump executive order that probably made that the most famous and thing out of an otherwise obscure bill. This is the gift of the gods to the technology sector. It basically says they can't be sued for the most part for harm that comes from user-generated content or for them moderating user-generated content. Lots of reasonable aspects. I mean, we can have a reasonable debate about whether this is a good or bad law. The aspects of it are obviously good. But if you have the nickname of the law was the Good Samaritan Law. So if you have a clear bad Samaritan in this space, like Backpage, that was knowingly trafficking in young children, why would you give them 230 protection? So number one is, I think, modest, really, and I emphasize that word modest, changes to 230 are not a bad idea. Earn it. Came out of Senate Judiciary recently and is on the Senate floor, I think, which would say if you do not use best practices to protect children on your platform against sexual abuse and other types of abuse, you lose 230. That's actually not a bad idea. There's lots of other bills that are floating around that would sort of poke at 230, and I think some change to 230 is a good idea. One of my favorite bills was proposed, and I'm going to forget, I'm sorry, the two members of Congress that proposed it. And what it says is that, and it gets back to what I was saying about the recommendation algorithms, is that if you algorithmically determine what your users read, see, and hear, which is, by the way, true of every single social media site. Nobody is a neutral platform. Yeah. Well, then you have a responsibility. You're essentially a publisher. Yes, it's user-generated content, but you are deciding what to show them. And if harm comes from your recommendation algorithm, if you recommend Facebook that somebody join a group that's associated with white supremacists and real world harm comes from that, yeah, you're going to be hearing from the lawyers. I actually think this is really smart because at the end of the day, this is the deep problem, is that the algorithms and the companies themselves have figured out that hateful, divisive, outrageous, and conspiratorial are good for business. So they promote it. They know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. And I think that's fine. That's a decision you made. It's actually not fine, but that's a decision you have made. But now you've got to deal with the consequences of that. You could have chosen a different thing. You could have said, look, less engagement for thoughtful, respectful, well-informed, decent. You could have done that. Stop pretending otherwise. So I think if you choose to be an asshole, well, then there should be responsibility. Sorry about that. I don't know why I swore. It's getting late in the day.
That's totally okay. So maybe last question I'll ask you is simply, we know in this world of today that we ourselves have to have lots of tools at our disposals to determine what's fake, what's real, to engage with the news as it comes to us in a more critical fashion than we have decades ago. When it comes to deep fakes, what are some simple steps that we as news consumers can do should we see something that just appears too good to be true or too horrendous to be true?
Couple of things. Today, and by the way, this may not be true 6 months from now, deep fakes tend to be pretty low quality. Both in terms of number of pixels and the compression quality. They tend to be pretty grainy. They do that to hide little artifacts that invariably come in when you're swapping one person's face. So really high quality HD C-SPAN raw feed, really, really hard to do. So quality of video is a good sign. Length of video. Really, really short clips are easier to manipulate than a 10-minute clip. So if somebody, for example, I've been talking now for about for an hour, wanted to create a deep fake of somebody else's face, that would have been incredibly difficult, right? So the length of the video matters. Other things like this, I've been occasionally drinking from my glass. Deep fakes don't know how to deal with that. If I do this, things go crazy with the deep fake. So any obscuring of the face, if I turn around like this. So the easy deep fakes are this: me standing in front of the camera with a fairly limited, rotation of the head. My hands are down. I'm not obscuring my face. And so, that sort of talking head, like you look like a little bit like a newscaster right now, right? You're just talking into the camera, 30 seconds. Those are the easy ones. So what is happening in the video also matters quite a bit today. right? 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 18 months from now, it's going to be a different story. It's going to be an evolving landscape. Here's the other thing, by the way, not so much for you and the people on this talk, but for everybody else, is stop getting your news on Facebook, man. I mean, what are you doing? Like, this is not, I mean, this is insane. We're getting our news from Twitter and from Facebook and YouTube and TikTok. Knock it off. Like, this will solve half of our problems. Like, understand that the folks who do the really hard work of investigative reporting and the editing team are incredibly good at their jobs. And there's a reason why we should pay for the New York Times and the Washington Post and the likes, is that that's where you get trusted information. So, you know, some of this is just good old fashioned, stop being a knucklehead.
That's fantastic. Dr. Hany Farid, this has been a tremendous pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Wow, but my head is bursting. We've just learned so much. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sandy. It was really great being here. And I'm just sorry we couldn't do it. I was telling Sandy early on how much I love Santa Fe. So I hope when you do invite me back, it'll be in Santa Fe next time.
Done. Consider the invitation sent. Thank you so
Excellent.
much. Have a great night and take care.
Thanks, you too.
Bye-bye.